So, you want a real review of Metal Wolf Chaos, do you? One that actually talks about the game instead of just laughing at the bad voice acting and over-the-top American patriotism, said nobody ever. Well, if you are that nobody, you've come to the right place. First, let's talk about the history of the game and then get into the review proper. Metal Wolf Chaos is a mech game by From Software, makers of Armored Core and Dark Souls. The game was only released in Japan despite having full English dialogue, and was somewhat legendary among mech fans and import fans. The game suddenly found mainstream popularity when popular YouTubers Super Best Friends did a Let's Play of the game in 2016. Sometime after, around 2 years later according to the internet, Devolver Digital announced they had purchased the rights to port the game to PC and publish it in the West almost 15 years after its initial release. Then, nothing for a surprisingly long amount of time. The game did attract controversy from far-left social justice types for using the tagline "Mech America Great Again", but nothing substantial news-wise. The game eventually came out in 2019, and while a year might not sound like a long time, the Super Best Friends have since split up and the memes about the game's cutscenes have long since passed. Anyone who only cared about that stuff has likely already seen the cutscenes online anyway. The game's story has you playing as the President of the United States of America. The country is being taken over by the evil Vice President, and it's up to you to liberate America. As said, cheesy dialogue and over-the-top patriotism is the order of the day. What's amazing about the story is, at least to me, is how relevant it is for a game made 15 years ago.
To our regret, our nation is in a crisis situation. Since 2010, domestic terrorism problems have increased rapidly. Economic disputes originating from the exhaustion of fossil fuels and the sudden rise in unemployment due to the influx of large-scale immigration. Neither the current president nor the American government took actions to address these various problems. On the contrary, they have filled their own pockets adhering to terrorist cells.
In particular, there's a CNN-style news station called DNN that is spreading fake news throughout the game.
Good news. Finally. Finally, the evil has been crushed. This evening, Metal Wolf, who suddenly showed up in New York, was thoroughly beaten to a pulp by Richard Hawk, piloting a special heavy mobile armor unit. He annihilated the evil.
Sadly, the cutscenes almost feel broken. Maybe it was just me, but the game seemed to be missing sound effects, or it was just poorly mixed. It makes the cutscenes feel a bit cheap and unfinished, and can undermine some of the game's cooler moments.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. President. Enter the underground base using this oversized back door here.
Metal Wolf Chaos is basically an arcade action game. The kind of thing SNES Drunk would describe as a game where you make things go boom. The specifics of each mission vary, but you'll spend most of your time destroying towers guarded by infantry, tanks and helicopters, though some missions will have you racing against a surprisingly strict time limit or fighting a boss. The game uses these variations, along with different level designs and gimmicks, to make each stage feel unique, or at least different enough to not feel repetitive. To give an example, one boss has a shield and a devastating laser weapon, but powers down as you destroy towers around the level. Another has you racing around a mostly linear path trying to destroy a cannon before it charges up. It's not a wanton destruction though. There are cages with hostages in them around the place, and using explosives on them will kill the people inside. Some have time bombs that will activate when you get close, and so have to be destroyed with small arms at a distance or very quickly. So I guess it kind of is all wanton destruction, just sometimes you want to be a bit more careful about it. You do all this killing, exploding and hostage saving with your mech that straddles the line between a mech and power armor. It has basic stuff like a boost and a ground pound attack, but the main feature of the mech is that it can dual wield weapons and has a backpack of 8 weapons that you can cycle between. That's what that crazy ring of weapons that appears occasionally is. It's basically a fancy weapon change animation. Though if you build up enough meter, you could do a special attack that involves firing a barrage of weapons all at once. Each weapon has different pros and cons, and there's lots of ways to mix up your loadout. Most of the differences are typical things like fire rate, range, ammo and damage. On the screen you might have noticed some rectangles. Weapons will automatically lock onto targets within those rectangles, including missiles, and weapons have rectangles of various sizes. So a weapon with a wide rectangle and a high rate of fire might be good at taking out infantry and projectiles. A bazooka does a lot of damage to tanks, but you have to be precise with your aim as the rectangle is fairly small. That kind of thing. I went through most of the game with an assault rifle in one hand and a bazooka in the other, though I used the grenade launcher to deal with riot shield guys as well. Ammo was a problem early on for me due to there being so many towers and tanks to destroy, but once I had better weapons that was less of an issue. Between missions you can invest in and manufacture new weapons. This is much simpler than it sounds. Basically you could buy new weapons at the shop, or you can pay money to upgrade the shop to sell better weapons. The game took me about 8.5 hours to complete on my first run through, though that includes a bunch of grinding for money I did. I think beating the game in about 6 to 7 hours is possible. I think I should also mention the difficulty. The game is made by From Software, best known for their Dark Souls series of games, and they have a reputation for making difficult games. Metal Wolf Chaos XD is not Dark Souls. I died more than a few times during my playthrough, but it's not the kind of game where you have to be a crazy obsessive in order to beat the campaign. There are harder modes called Fever and Hell, but I've not played those at the time of writing. So, do I recommend Metal Wolf Chaos XD? Well, I like it. It has some flaws, and it can feel a bit like a budget game at times, which makes sense given its budget game price. But it is a fun enough playthrough that I think it's worth your time if you're into action games.